And good afternoon, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio. And I thank you for joining me on another, well, it's not really fine Saturday afternoon. It's really cold and it's snowy, and it looks like this winter is going to pay us back for last winter that was pretty nice and mild here in Pittsburgh. But I hope you all out there had a great holiday on Friday, and I hope you continue to have a great holiday weekend. And before I begin, I just want to encourage you all to please check out our YouTube channel where we bring you podcasts such as this one. There's The Hangover, the Scobro Show, the Steelers Preview, the Steelers Postgame. What else we have? I always stumble. Steelers Postgame, and then there's the Know Your Enemy every Wednesday. Then we have audio only shows such as the Retro Show, the Live Mic, Let's Ride, the Stat Geek, and the Touchdown Under by the gentleman from Australia whose names I always can never remember. I should write those down and have it like sort of like a password. That's a great show. You can catch that every I think Saturday morning or Friday night. But please check that out. Check out our YouTube channel, and you can find us on any audio platform. And please check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website, where we bring you news, commentary, film breakdown, any kind of injury update, any kind of trade, anytime there's news, we're one of the first to bring it to you. So please check us out. As we like to say, it's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. And welcome to everybody in the live chat. There's Lumberzack. Happy holidays, Steelers Pittsburgh. All I want for Christmas is a Steeler win. Here. Corey, wow. Schwendeman. Ezra. And here's what Corey says. I have to bring. Well, sorry, I messed that up again. I have to bring this up. I'll only listen if it's better content than Juju is dancing the problem. Well, I'm going to touch on that, but I don't know if you're going to like it or not. So you can listen up to then and then decide as you're listening if you want to log off. So anyway, thank you all for joining me in the live chat. And as always, I have a few topics I want to discuss, and we'll start off with last Monday's debacle in Cincinnati, Paul Brown Stadium, the home away from home that was not so much this time. They really laid an egg. I think that's one of the worst games they've played. Actually, it was probably the worst game they've played with Ben since the Patriots game in Week 1 back in 2019. It was a horrible performance with the division on the line. And yes, they have 3 weeks. As of Monday, they had 3 weeks to clinch the division. They just needed one win. But after the previous 2 games and after the way they had been playing for about a month or so, and with everybody questioning their credentials as a Super Bowl contender, even before they lost their first game, that could have been a game where you went out and you just dominated a clearly inferior opponent that was already compromised even more than they usually were, because guys like Joe Burrow were gone. I think it was Geno Atkins, or was it Carlos Dunlap? One of those guys was out. I mean, they were really a compromised team, looking forward to the offseason, I'm sure, and getting their 2020 campaign over with. And you go out there and you just look totally lifeless against them. You turn the ball over 3 times in the first half, it leads to 17 points. You're down 17-0 at the half. It was just inexcusable. And I've been on here for a few weeks now trying to come up with answers. I'm obviously not an X's and O's guy. There are a lot of people on this site who write for Behind the Steel Curtain and talk about the team on podcasts and everything who are more qualified. And they've been trying to come up with answers, and whatever answers are out there, the Steelers haven't found them yet. It doesn't really matter what we say or what anybody else says. The Steelers haven't found the answers yet. They haven't found them on offense for sure, whether it's Ben, the offensive line, the offensive coordinator, the receivers dropping the ball. It's a bunch of problems, and it's it's hard to say, things just look pretty bleak right now. And of course they have the injury issues on defense. Devin Bush, Bud Dupree, they keep guys keep getting hurt. Robert Spillane, Ulysses Gilbert III, he went on the IR again. Who else is hurt? There's just so many people that are integral to that defense that are out right now, and so it's a tough time for them. It's a tough time for the team, and really, I mean, as I wrote about last week, they have nobody to blame but themselves for all the criticism they're getting. Whether it's rational criticism, like what the heck's wrong with them right now? What's going on with this team? Why are they playing so poorly? That's rational. To the irrational stuff like Juju's dancing on the logo, and that's why he's riling the other team up, and we need to bring in Sam Darnold for next year, or Carson Wentz or whomever. To that irrational stuff, they deserve it all, because when you play like that, you open yourself up to just about everything. And believe me, there are a lot of things that people are discussing that I want no part of. I just think are nonsense, and I think it's a joke. Like the Juju thing, I think it's a joke, and I'll touch on that later. And the whole thing about looking ahead to next year and bringing in Sam Darnold or Carson Wentz or Marcus Mariota, whomever, Dwayne Haskins, whoever you want to mention. I just think it's all. I don't know why people are worried about that right now. I mean, they're in the playoffs and they have a chance to turn it around. You would hopefully anyway. I mean, but again, when you lose 3 in a row and you play as poorly as they have, you deserve every little bit of criticism you get. So, and it's the 3rd straight December collapse for them. I mean, it's not complete. They can still turn it around, but this is the 3rd straight December that they've kind of fallen off a cliff. And it used to be the opposite under Mike Tomlin. And they used to be playing their best football this time of year. Now, for the last three Decembers, they're playing their worst football. And there are some legitimate reasons why. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was saying, well, 2018 they had a lot of bad luck. As far as the officials, a couple of those games, the Saints game, the Chargers game, you could point to some calls that if they would have went the other way, they would have won, and that's true. And of course, last year you had the quarterback issue, and you can explain that away, and again, that's true. And this year, as I mentioned, there's some injuries, and the COVID issue and the scheduling, and maybe they might be a little bit tired right now, and again, that's true, but it doesn't matter. People aren't going to care about that. They're going to look at, if it finishes out, if this season finishes up on a truly bad note, and that would be losing their last 2 games and going 1-10 in the playoffs, people are not going to care about the excuses or the reasons. They're going to want Mike Tomlin to be held accountable. And you know what that means? That means they're going to want him fired. They're going to want him to be fired. That's what being held accountable means. When people say that, what else could it mean other than they're not going to dock him pay? So when people say so-and-so needs to be held accountable, that means they want them gone. So you're going to be hearing all this talk again. So, it's a tough spot right now. And what's really alarming to me is if you go back to 2019, okay, it's a quarterback issue. So you can explain that away. But what really has me alarmed is the 2018 collapse. You could point to any number of things. Yes, the officials made some questionable calls, and there were also some just boneheaded plays that they seemed to make at the wrong time, whether it was Ben throwing a red zone pick, or James Conner fumbling, or Juju fumbling, or that questionable fake punt on 4th and 1 or 4th and 3, whatever it was, the Rosie Nix play where he famously signaled a first down. I think it was like a half a yard short. So you could point to some things where they look strong, they look like contenders. They just made some boneheaded mistakes at the wrong time, and that happens every now in the NFL, and teams just have some bad stretches. But this year, they just don't look competitive right now. They don't look like they can beat anybody, as evidenced by last Monday against the Bengals. They don't look like they can beat anybody right now. Whether it's the Bengals or the Chiefs, I wouldn't feel very confident going, and I don't feel that confident against the Colts on Sunday. I don't feel like going into that game, until they show me otherwise. I don't feel so confident, and that's what's so alarming. It's not that they're in a slump, is they just don't look like they can beat anybody. They don't look like a true competitive team. I watched a bunch of football last weekend leading up to Monday night. So many of the so-called contenders like the Bills, the Titans, Ravens, Packers, Chiefs, they all look strong, right? They look strong and formidable. But the Steelers, they just look lifeless. They look like they look crippled. They look just shot. So that's an issue. And how they turn it around, again, to repeat what I said earlier in the show, I don't know. I don't know how you turn it around. I've thought of everything from they got to try to throw deeper. They got to try to throw intermediate passes. They got to try more balance. They got to try running the ball. Blah blah blah. And right now, I can't think of a solution. But the good news is, I guess if you want to look at it that way, is when a team is in this kind of a funk, oftentimes you don't see the answers, because if you could see the answers, me or you out there and in the live chat or anybody else who wasn't directly involved with the team, if you could see the answers, if you knew the answers, and surely they could discover them too. So if it was just as easy as seeing the problem and identifying it and fixing it, then teams would never have these kind of streaks where they just look absolutely horrific. And I think Mark Caboli tweeted out every contender's slump throughout the year. And he even included the Chiefs, which I think he missed the mark on that one, because the best he came up with Kansas City was a bunch of one possession wins, which, you'll take that every time. A win is a win. But, he highlighted the Bills. They had I think they lost 3 out of 4 or 3 in a row at one point. The Titans had a huge slump. The Ravens had a slump. The Saints have had their difficulties. The Buccaneers, that super team with Tom Brady and Gronk and now AB, they've gotten their doors blown off twice by the Saints this year. So, he made a good point. Every contender other than the Chiefs, who again he included for some reason, has had a rough patch this year, and the Steelers are clearly in their rough patch, and I think the reason why it seems worse than what everybody else was going through is because it's happening at the end of the year. If you have a little slump in the middle of the year, it doesn't seem so bad. You don't notice it as much because especially if you pull out of it by November and December. But if it happens after an 11-0 start, then people are going to notice it more, and it's going to seem like the end of the world, and it's going to seem like time is running out as far as turning things around, and that's how it appears right now. But and I'm going to touch on this more later. Kevin Greene, as you probably know, he passed away on Monday. It was a shock to everybody at the age of 58. And as he said, when he went into the Hall of Fame, his favorite time, he played for a bunch of different teams. He played for the Rams, he played for the Panthers twice, the 49ers. But his favorite time, his favorite 3-year period of his career was those 3 years in the mid-90s when he played for the Steelers. He came here as a free agent. And, much like this year, they had a horrific slump in the middle of that 95 season, the year that they went to the Super Bowl. That's his, from what he said, his fondest moment was going to that Super Bowl 30, because he had a lot of, he played for a lot of strong contenders, but he never made it to the Super Bowl. So that 95 team meant a lot to him. But that year they were in the middle of a string where they lost 4 out of 5. They dropped their first game ever against the expansion Jaguars at their place. They capped it off. Or they were blown out by the Vikings at Three River Stadium. That famous game where Bill Cowher went up, rushed up to the referee and shoved a picture in his pocket of some penalty that they call it, where they said the Steelers had too many men on the field, where they clearly didn't. That they had that blowout loss, and they got their doors blown off on a Thursday night, a primetime game against, of all teams, the Bengals. Jeff Blake, he was the quarterback. He kind of had their number at certain times in that era. He was a handful for them more often than not, and that dropped them to 3-4. And it looked like the end of the world. I mean, they did not look like a strong team at all through 7 games. Neil O'Donnell was struggling. They lost Rod Woodson to an ACL tear in week 1. They just did not look like the same team from the year before that went to the AFC Championship game. And it looked like they were still suffering the effects of that horrific loss to the Chargers in that AFC title game. Maybe the worst loss in franchise history. That loss to the Chargers, and it looked like they were still suffering ill effects of that loss, and they were 3-4. And what I remember Bill Cowher saying is, okay, this is a 9-game season now. That's how you have to think of it. Clean the slate, 9-game season. And after that, they won every game of consequence through Super Bowl 30, up until Super Bowl 30. So at that point, I mean, how they looked then is kind of how they look now. Not like they did 2 years ago, but they looked like a really good team that just kept making mistakes. They looked helpless, that 95 team, through 7 weeks. They looked shot, non-competitive. And the games that they did win, they just barely squeaked by, and they didn't look all that impressive. Yet they found it. They found the formula, and they went on a nice run. I mean, we talk about that 05 team a lot, and how bad that things looked for them at 7-5 in early December of that year. And I remember, I'm a big time sports radio junkie, and I've been listening to sports talk radio since my high school days. And at the time, the show that I listened to the most was the Junker and Crow show on, at that time, 1250. I think they're Disney now, but at the time they were the ESPN affiliate, on the radio affiliate. And things were so bad around here that one of the news stations went and interviewed Guy Junker and Eddie Crow. They went there and they interviewed them, like, before their show or after show, and what's wrong with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it looked bad, and that game, the bottom, rock bottom, and that year was a loss to the Bengals at home. So, right now it doesn't look like they have the answers, but it doesn't mean they can't find them. If you want some recent examples of some teams that went into the postseason kind of struggling a bit, the 2012 Ravens, I think they lost 3 out of 4 heading into the postseason, and they went from maybe having a bye to they were the number 4 seed. They won the division, but they were the 4th seed, and nobody gave them a shot. And they went on to win the Super Bowl the year before. The Giants were 7-7 heading into the last 2 games, and they needed to win their last 2 games to clinch the NFC East, and nobody gave them much of a shot. Even though they did that, they won. They beat the Jets and the Cowboys, and they were the number 4 seed, but nobody gave them much of a shot of doing anything in the postseason, because they just didn't look like a good team, and yet they went on to win the Super Bowl. So if you're looking for some fairly recent examples of a team that was struggling down the stretch that got things turned around just in time to go on a Super Bowl run, there's two non-Steeler examples, and then the 2 from 95 and 05, the 2 Steeler examples. So, things look pretty bleak right now, but it doesn't mean they can't turn it around. They just have to find the answer somewhere, and maybe it's just a matter of winning a game. You win a game and you look fairly solid in doing it, and if they can somehow beat the Colts, or a really good team with a really good defense, if they can do that on Sunday, clinch the AFC North, maybe that's all the confidence that they need heading into the postseason, and then they can rest their starters in week 17, because you could pretty much forget about the bye. But if you beat the Colts tomorrow, then you essentially wrap up the you wrap up the at least the number 3 seed, because you beat the Titans, and I think if you beat the Colts, then I think that helps the Titans win the division, and I think you would beat them out for the number 3 seed. I think that's how it's going to work. So you would at least clinch that. And as I said last week, as long as you make it, as long as you're in that 2-3 bracket for the postseason, I think, and you can avoid the Chiefs for as long as possible, and to at least the AFC Championship game. Well, yeah, to the AFC Championship game. Then I think that's what you have to do. So if they can beat the Colts tomorrow, I think that'll go a long way in giving them some confidence. So on that note, that brings to a close the first half of this episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. If you're watching on YouTube, please stay with me. If you're listening on one of our audio platforms, please download part 2 of this episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. And welcome back. And since I rambled on for 20 minutes, I want to see if I can find any juicy comments to bring up before I go on to touch on a couple more topics and then answer some questions. Well, here's one from Derwin Prosser. It's pretty simple, straight to the point. Believe in all capital letters. Exactly. Here's one from Ezra. Hey, gang, I really do believe we will be in the AFC Championship. We just got to run the ball, even if it ends up in a punting affair. Well, I think they have to fix the passing game. I mean, I think that's, running the ball is great and all, but they're not going to get anywhere unless they open up that passing game and are more successful. Because a lot of people think you run to open up the pass, but I think in this case you have to pass to open up the run, because they're, as we've talked about many times, they're so intent on taking the short passing game away that they're crowding the line of scrimmage. And the Steelers haven't really shown that they can beat that yet. So until they do, they're not going to be able to run the ball. So I think they have to try to open things up a bit, and then that'll open up the running game. But that's for we'll discuss that a little bit further down the road. But my next topic is, of course, Juju. And I forget the person's name who said they would listen as long as I didn't bring that up. Well, I'm bringing it up. I'm sorry. And he announced on Wednesday that he will no longer dance on the opposing team's logo before the game. And as I mentioned in the first half of the show, when you go on a 3-game losing streak and you look like dog, doing it, you open yourself up to criticism of all kinds, including the irrational stuff, such as a player rallying up the other team by dancing on their logo. And I just think, I'm sorry, me, as wacky as I am with my writing, I'm a pretty practical guy, and I just can't. You're never going to convince me that that's a big deal. I just don't think it has anything to do with anything. The Bengals can say what they want about how it riled them up, and it affected the game somehow. And yes, Juju took a hard shot, but they weren't going to hit him anyway. Going across the middle, that kind of a play where basically Ben hung him out to dry on that pass, that short little crossing pass. He wasn't going to get smashed anyway. I mean, come on, of course he was. Again, you're never going to convince me that matters. It wasn't an issue until they started losing, and then it became one of the reasons why they started playing poorly. But and people point to the past a lot, and they talk about stuff that how focused these teams were during championship years. But the only reason why they say that is because those eras, those teams won. But if you think back to those glory days, and if you want to bring up the most recent glory days of the aughts, 2000s, and those 2 Super Bowl teams, what did Hines Ward like to do? He liked to mock the other team with some of their players' touchdown celebration dances. Like he used to do the Chad Ochocinco river dance. He used to mock the dog pound and pretend like he was marking his territory after scoring a touchdown in Cleveland. He did the Terrell Owens his touchdown celebration, flapping the arms in that one game against the Eagles. He used to talk all kind of trash to teams. He used to get into it all the time, and just he never shut up. Joey Porter used to get in trouble all the time for his quotes in the paper. You remember that one article that came out right before the divisional round playoff game against the Colts, that 2005 season, where he said the Colts were a finesse team and that they were soft, and that was like taboo. How dare you say that? You're going to rile the other team up. You're going to motivate them. He used to walk around with his abs exposed before games, talking trash to anybody, getting into fights. And it's funny how that never seemed to work against the Patriots and the in like the Steve McNair era Titans. That never seemed to work against them, but it worked against, quote unquote, worked against the Bengals and teams like that. So it did. That's not the reason why they won or lost any game. So again, I'm a pretty practical guy, and you're never gonna convince me that means anything. It's just it's all nonsense to me. So, but I am glad that he's going to stop doing it, only because it's one less reason that people are going to look to, one less illogical reason that people are going to look to as to why they've been struggling. So if they lose tomorrow on Sunday, which I hope they don't, but if they do, at least they can't point to that. They can point to more tangible reasons, like probably turnovers or penalties or Ben's arm or whatever. So, it's people, like when I talk about this issue, I try to act diplomatic when I'm talking to other people about it. But if you really want to know the honest truth about it, I think it's nonsense. I think that kind of stuff is nonsense. I honestly do. Worrying about that and using it as a reason, I'm sorry, but I just do. And that's all I want to say about that. And then I just wanted to talk about Kevin Greene, and I want to talk about it in the sense that of those '90s teams. And here's what he helped to represent. Cause if you're somebody who's my age, I'm 48. Brian talked about, we're the same age. He just turned 49, so we grew up sharing the same memories and experiences. And he talked about what Kevin Greene meant to him and those teams, and those '90s teams meant so much to me as a fan. Because if you're in your mid to late 40s, 50s, early 50s, then you probably don't remember much about those '70s Steelers teams. I certainly don't. I don't remember anything other than Super Bowl 14. So I grew up in the '80s, and it was they had their moments. They made it to an AFC Championship game. They won a couple division titles. They made it to playoffs a few times. But other than that that magical '89 run where they snuck into the playoffs on basically they needed the Vikings to win on the very last regular season game. They needed them to beat the Bengals to get in. Other than that '89 squad, the Steelers didn't. They were an average, mediocre to below football team from like '85 through Chuck Noll's last year in 1991. I mean, there was nothing to be excited about with the Steelers. And in fact, by the early '90s, the Penguins had sort of become the new popular team in town. They won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and of course, people they're gonna notice that. And there was a huge kind of revolution in the city in terms of hockey. Mario Lemieux and those teams really. A lot of people just turned to hockey as their new pastime. And of course, the Pirates had a 3-year run where they won the division every year, and they came up short in the playoffs, but they drew 2 million fans a year, and it seemed like the old Civic Arena and the old Three River Stadium during baseball season, they were the places to be. In Three River Stadium during football season, during Steelers season, not so much. So to quote former President Jimmy Carter, there was a great malaise when it came to the Pittsburgh Steelers in Chuck Noll's latter years. So when Bill Cowher took over in '92, that all changed. Suddenly, the magic was back. He brought a passion and emotion, a new attitude, and it was like it was something that somebody like me was waiting for my whole teenage years and early 20s. Actually, was I still a teenager? I think I just turned 20. So my entire teenage years were, I I was envious of the Browns and the Bengals and the Oilers. They seemed to kick the Steelers' butts more often than not. It was a rough time, So for him to come here and sort of just change the culture of the Steelers and make them contenders again, and Kevin Greene was part of that. He was part of that culture. He brought a passion and enthusiasm, him along with Greg Lloyd. I mean, they cared about one thing, and that was kicking the opponent's butts and making sure that they respected them on the field, and they weren't going to be doormats any longer. And it was like, if you were around in the 70s and you remember Jack Ham and Jack Lambert and Andy Russell and those linebackers, that's what this kind of linebacking core was Lloyd and Kevin Greene. They called him Quiver and Quake. And they were certainly sack masters. I mean, they just they got after the quarterback relentlessly, kind of like what TJ Watt and Bud Dupree were doing the last couple of years. So it was something I'll never forget, and it was those teams will always be special to me. And I'll never forget the day that Kevin Greene signed a contract with the Steelers. They showed him coming during the news, during the sports segment of the news. They showed Kevin Greene walking into the facility with whoever he was walking with. I can't remember. And the one sports anchor said, "He kind of looks like Hulk Hogan." It might have been John Steiger. That sounds like something he would have said. And he did. He kind of looked like Hulk Hogan. He had like long hair, and I think he had a bandana. So it was pretty cool to see a guy like that, who I remembered for many years playing with the Rams, and the Rams had some decent teams in the mid to late 80s, and they had to battle a lot with the 49ers all the time, just to win the division, which they never did because the 49ers were so good. But I mean, he to me, him being one of their first high profile free agent signings, which he was, I think free agency came into effect in '93, and just the thought of a player like that playing in Pittsburgh, that was pretty cool, and it helped legitimize what they were trying to do here. And it was a great run, and it was a time that I'll never forget. Even though they didn't win it all, they came up short a few times, painfully so. A couple times in the AFC Championship game, and of course in Super Bowl 30, they just could never get over the hump. But those were some fun times. I mean, of course it coincided with me being in my 20s, and time seemed so much simpler for me back then. But the past always does. So I'll never forget those years, and Kevin Greene was a huge part of it. So R.I.P. to him, and my condolences to his family. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about as far as Kevin Greene. It was a tragic loss, and you just never know. But on that note, that's pretty much all I had to talk about. All I have to talk about today, and I will open things up to some questions and comments to round out the show. Here's one from Mark. Wait a minute. Bear with me. I think I skipped over one. Anyway, Mark said, if we win on Sunday, then rest the starters in week 17, and I agree. And here's one from Foragio Telly. I hope everybody got dripped in their Steelers gear this Christmas. Best believe I'm rocking new gear this Sunday. There you go. I didn't get any, but I'm 48 and a half, and I don't have any kids, so there's really nobody out there to buy me any Steeler gear. But I have old Steeler gear, and that's fine. And here's one from Ezra. Do we even consider going after beast mode? No, I don't even. He's done, right? He's doing commercials. I don't think he even wants to play anymore. No, I don't think that's in the cards right now. I don't know if he's even in football shape. So here's a comment from Ryan O'Toole. Loved Greene and WCW as a wrestler. Yeah, he was. He had a run right around the time the Steelers were in that Super Bowl. He was I think he was a satellite member of the Four Horsemen, or he went up against the Four Horsemen, something like that. I think at one point he turned heel. So my memory is kind of fuzzy, but I know he had a run there as a wrestler. You probably could have become a wrestler if he wanted to. I mean, he certainly had the charisma and the look and the athleticism for it. So yeah, he definitely had a nice little run there. Here's one from Daredevil about Marshawn Lynch. Lynch said he would play on a Contender. Well, he could say that, but is he in shape? That's the thing. And here's one that I can get behind. Tony, when we win it all, I'm getting you an authentic Steeler jersey. That's from Ezra. Well, thank you, Ezra. I'll hold you to it. I have one authentic jersey, and that's Hines Ward. It's probably if I had the talent to play football, I'd probably be a lot like Hines Ward. Do a little trash talking, maybe some illegal hits every now and then, but I would always play hard. Here's one from Mark Tobin. Do you think the offense is handicapped because of Ben's limitations? If he would have asked me that a couple weeks ago, I would have said, heck no. But now I'm beginning to wonder. I don't think it's his arm. I think it might be his knee. And why they're keeping that a secret, if it is true, why they're keeping it a secret is beyond me. I don't know, unless they're afraid of defenders targeting him. But I mean, if there's a problem with his knee, and you can always sit him out for a week, and that's why I hope they win on Sunday. Sit him out and put in Mason Rudolph, and he could pick up where Landry Jones left off a few years ago, the last time Pittsburgh made the playoffs, playing the Browns in Week 17, a meaningless game. So I do think it might be. I do think that might be an issue, but again, we'll never know because for some reason, as you know, when it comes to certain injuries, they're not totally transparent. Some they are and some they're not, and you just never know with Ben with injuries. Sometimes it seems like he's embellishing his injuries, and sometimes it seems like they're covering up when he's hurt. So it's hard to say, but I do think that has something to do with it. And I also think it's the line. I think they've had some injury issues on that line, and certain players aren't playing well. And Al Villanueva looked awful last week against Carl Lawson. They're down to their third stringer at left guard now with Matt Filer out, and Kevin Dotson, he was hurt last week. So J.C. Hassenauer, he played left guard. This has not been a great year for DeCastro. I think it's safe to say Pouncey's been struggling the last couple of years, and of course Shooks hasn't been playing well lately. So it could be it's limitations with him, but it also could be the line. It's hard to say. There's so many things that you could point to. That's the thing. When a team starts struggling, there are so many areas you can point to. But Ben's physical limitations might be a factor. Yeah, I mean, Peyton Manning, he was fine until he hit 39, and that last year in 2015, he hit the occasional good throw, but by and large, he just didn't have it anymore. So maybe it could be as simple as that. It could be earlier in the year he was going on adrenaline. He was fresh from having a year off and all the rehab to get his elbow right, and all the cardio he did, the weight loss and everything. And maybe he enjoyed a couple of great months there of his old form, so to speak. And now maybe it's age is catching up to him again this late in the year. Well, I don't know. And here's another. Here's one from Raheem Hunt. Against the Ravens, the first time he was making up plays on the spot. I guess that's an issue with the coordinator. I'm not sure. These comments fly by pretty quickly. Here's another one from Ezra. When do we decide to give Ray I'm on the McLeod more touches? Sorry, Deontay fans, but Ray is the same player with better hands. I don't agree with that. I think Deontay Johnson's a special player. Ray has his athleticism. He's a great athlete, and he's quick and fast, and he's a really capable punt returner. At least he was earlier in the year. But I think Deontay Johnson's a much better talent, really. So I don't see him factoring in. And I skipped over a super chat from Dave Shipley, and I can't find it, but I found it on my screen, and it says it's $5, and thank you for the $5, Dave. Being as rested more than recently in That's I'm not understanding this question. Being rested more than recently, and some players coming back should help a lot. Thoughts? Yeah, yeah. I think for some players it should help, but other players haven't gotten the rest. Like Ben hasn't really had any rest since since right before the bye week. Really, the original bye week. But I mean, I guess they did get some rest in that huge period there when the Ravens game was canceled or postponed a few times. And Ezra follows up special. He leads the league in third down drops. Yeah, maybe he does, but it doesn't mean he's not a special player. It just means he's a young player who's going through a rough patch. But clearly the offense is so much better when he is productive. So what are you going to do? Are you going to put a lesser talent in there just because he's struggling with the drops? I mean, sometimes you got to let these young guys work through their issues, and catching passes, that's something that can be rectified through repetition and through maturing as a player. So, there isn't like a special natural God-given talent to catching passes. I mean, maybe there is, I don't know, but it seems to me like it's something that's a learned thing. And guess what? They all have issues with drops. We've seen them all drop passes this year. They lead the league in drops, and they're not all by Deontay Johnson. So I don't know why. I mean, people always they think that they think less, benching a player for a lesser talent is going to make things better. And more often than not, it doesn't. It makes things worse. So no, I think you have to put him in there, and you have to let him work through his issues because he is an integral part of their passing game. It's clear that he's the closest thing that they have to Antonio Brown in terms of his physical gifts. So it's something that Ben's used to, right? I mean, he played so many years with Brown, and they did some special things together. So, he probably wants him in there because he reminds him of Antonio Brown. So to take him out and put Ray McLeod in there, who's not nearly the kind of receiver that he is, what are you going to do with him? A bunch of end arounds and jet sweeps? I mean, obviously teams have caught on to that. So to me, Ray McLeod is like, I don't know, as far as receivers in terms of actual talent, maybe Darius, he's not the same kind of receiver, but maybe Darius Hayward-Bay. He's a speed guy, but nothing else. And I don't know what you could do with him unless you get him the ball in space. So I don't know. I just think he's more like a camp darling than anything else. And here's one from Big Marv. What's goody, Tony? Ezra, what's up, bro? Do you think we will ever get back to great gameplay? I think they can. At this point, as I alluded to earlier in the show, I don't know how. And as I said earlier, when a team's in this kind of a funk, you often don't see the silver or the light at the end of the tunnel until it's there. Sometimes you just don't know how they're going to get out of it until they get out of it. It's like when you're in a slump in life. It's always darkest before the dawn, or it's often darkest before the dawn, and you don't see how things are going to get better until they actually do, and then you find the answer. So sometimes the answers aren't right there in front of our faces, but you just have to keep grinding away, and I guarantee you, as much as we like to disparage the coaches and some of these players for a lack of focus, I guarantee you they're quote unquote in the lab, trying to figure this thing out because they know that the season started out so strong. They don't want to flush another season down the toilet after starting 11-0. That just would not be a good look for this organization. It would not be a good look for Tomlin or Ben, anybody, Kevin Colbert, you name it. It would not be a good look for them to go 11-0 and then just totally collapse and go one and done in the playoffs. If they really collapse, if they lose out, then they're not going to win the division. Could you imagine? This would be the second time in 3 years that they had a big lead in the division and they let it slip away. So they have to find a way. They have to get their act together. Here's one from Z Smooth. Should Juju be put in a timeout, or has he already? I mean, what do you mean by timeout? I mean, that's the thing. What has he done wrong other than some pregame ritual that means nothing? If there's some kind of off the field thing or some kind of thing where he's late all the time to practice or to meetings, and yeah, you put him in a timeout. But he's a valuable member of their passing attack. You don't put him in a timeout. I mean, these are professionals, and they're not going to do that. He's too valuable for them. He's a go-to guy for Ben. You don't put a player in. You don't discipline a player for something that silly. And I think it's nonsense. As I said earlier, I think it's a joke. Here's one from. Yeah, there you go. That's from Raheem Hunt, if I can find it here. Minka had a pick 6 last season versus the Colts for like 90 yards. There you go. We can certainly use some of that magic tomorrow. Some of that Minka magic. Here's a comment from Big Marv. I really think Ben has something going on with his health, but he's trying not to show it. I hope not. I agree with that. I think there's something with his knee, because if you look at a lot of his passes, he's throwing off his back foot. He's not following through on his left leg. So what that tells me is it's a knee issue, and obviously it's not an ACL issue or an MCL. It's not a tear as far as I know. It's probably some kind of sprain or a bruise or something that might be helped out greatly with a week off, with 2 weeks off. And he doesn't practice much during the week. I realize that, but one game in the NFL. I mean, and a lot of these guys can't even walk for 3 days. So I think it would benefit him greatly to sit a week. I think it would clear his mind. I think he would be able to heal up. Because you remember the old Ben, like through like the early 20-teens, he was always like, I want to be out there with my guys no matter what, whether they had something to play for or not. But starting with that 2016 season finale against the Browns at Heinz Field, where they had everything wrapped up. They had just clinched the AFC North on Christmas Day a week earlier, and their seed was set for the playoffs. They had nothing to play for, and people expected Ben to say, I want to be out there with my guys. But he said, no, I think I could use a break, because they were a wild card, or not a wild card, but they were in a wild card round, so they didn't have a bye. They were a number 3 seed. So he sat out that game, and he sat out the last game a year later against the Browns. They were the number 2 seed. They didn't have a great shot of getting a number 1 seed. The Patriots had the inside track on that going into week 17. So he sat that game. So if they can wrap up the division on Sunday, I think a week off will really do him some good. And that's it for me today. I next time I see you, I know I don't want. I shouldn't say this, but I have a new job, and I'm going to be working pretty much every Saturday. So we talked a while ago about moving the show to Friday. So I don't know if that's going to be this Friday or a future Friday, but I think that's where this show is going to be from now on. It's probably going to have a different name. Wanted to let you all in on that. So it can't be Steelers Brunch with Tony anymore if it's like at 9:00 at night or whenever on a Friday night. So stay tuned for that. It's either going to be this coming Friday or the following Friday, but this is going to be my final show for Saturday, unless we decide to do it Saturday night. Which I don't think it's going to happen. So, but it's going to be on Friday. So it was fun hang out with you guys every Saturday afternoon. I look forward to hanging out with you on Friday nights moving forward. So on that note, you guys enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend. Enjoy that Steeler game, and have a great New Year's. And go Steelers.